Cool.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to April 22nd edition of the Gateway API Community Sync. As always, this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, boiling down to effectively be nice to one another. So please do be nice to one another. We have, we have an agenda. I think most of it is about the 1.1 progress. If you have something that you want to add to the agenda, hang on. My dog decided that like right now is the moment to start yapping. One sec. All right. If you have anything that you want to add to the agenda, it's an open agenda. Please do just add it above the triage and underneath the current items. If we can't make it to any of those items today, it's always fair to put it into the next section above where we can get to it on the next meeting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Do we have anybody new that wants to say hi? I'll give a couple seconds for that. We do sometimes try to remember to say hi to new people and hear from new people what their interest is and stuff like that. If that's
Hey.
you, please do feel free to raise your hand.
I've been here before, but it's very rare, maybe once or twice. I'm Andy. I worked on the Gateway API
Andy.
implementation for external DNS, and had some questions about it when I was first doing it, and some more questions about it now if we have time.
Yeah, very cool. Please do feel free to drop something on the agenda if there's like
I did.
some specific
It's there.
questions. Okay, cool. Very nice. Yeah, thanks for joining. I haven't dug into that implementation yet. I should. Cool. Anybody else? All right, then we're gonna get going. We are gonna start by talking about the V1.1 progress. I'll give you a second to go if you want, Rob. I imagine you want
Sure.
to lead on that one a little bit.
Yeah, so 1.1 is moving along. As you have seen, probably we had our we usually, when we do new releases in Gateway API, we have to run it by SIG Network leads. And now that we have a proper set of technical leads specifically, that's who we ran it by. On Friday, we finally got a time where everyone could be in the same, roughly everyone, all the TLs at least could be in the same place. Those slides have been updated since I shared them last, and they're a bit more exhaustive. There's also a changelog in there that has been very collaboratively developed. Thank you to everyone who has helped fill that out. And then Flynn took some very good meeting notes. There are also some very hilarious AI generated meeting notes, but these are much, much better. Thank you to Flynn for spending the time to write those up. But the high level summary is TLs are on board with what we're doing. That's kind of what we expected. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with an RC1. They do have some time where they can review the PR that is actually, we have a diff, as we always do, of the API spec between the last release 1.0 and this one 1.1. I'd encourage anyone to take a look at it. I forgot to link it in the agenda, but it's one of the more recent ones. It's linked in the slides anyway. But yeah, it's a little informative to compare what we've done and say, did we really do this all on purpose? And, did we make any mistakes along the way? With that said, RC1 we're targeting for Wednesday. And then hopefully 2 weeks from then, we'll get a final release out. RC2 is something we've always had to do because we've always missed something in RC1. If for some miracle we do not miss anything in RC1, then we'll go directly to the final release. But the thing that I really, really want to encourage is if implementations out there can take a minute to try working with RC1 and see if conformance tests pass for them, if CRD is installed, etc. Just make sure that things are working as they expect. And then finally, I know that both Candace and Flynn had shown some interest in starting a blog post for this release, a Kubernetes blog post. I don't know the status of that, but if either of them are on this call, maybe they can chime in and see if anything has.
I'm here. Is Flynn here too?
Cool.
This is
I
Candace.
don't see
We'd
them.
like for Flynn, I think.
Okay. I actually had added something to the end of this because I hadn't seen that you put something up here. So I was just the skeleton is in place, and the outline is in place, and I think I'm shooting for May 13th for the blog to be released. But they need 2 weeks advance notice. So we should try to get this stuff done over the next week. Like, and this stuff, I mean, for each of these features, you know, just I don't know, a paragraph or two.
Yep.
Or a picture, if that works better. And I think I just don't know who would be the best person to contact for gRPC route.
Oh yeah, I
And
can make that connection. I
Richard?
don't know if Richard's on the call, but yeah, I can. Oh, great. Okay.
Richard Belville.
Yes, that's me.
Okay. And parent ref port.
Frank has basically taken that over. I don't know if I don't see him on the call, but he's usually pretty responsive on Slack or GitHub. So Frank, that's the GitHub Frank Boo. I think it's Budinsky. Someone correct me. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's the GitHub username.
Okay.
Cool.
Everybody.
And yeah, I think the big deal. Thank you for raising all this. I think the biggest thing is just if we can aim to have a draft PR. It doesn't need to be perfect, but just a draft PR is enough to help signal to SIG Docs reviewers that, oh, by the way, this is coming along, and please be ready to review it. I know this week with Kubernetes 1.30 just having been released, there's probably a lot of attention on that, but yeah, we should have time in 2 weeks or so when all that dies down.
Okay, I should be able to get a PR out tonight.
Oh, awesome.
John Howard, since you're here, would you be willing to do the gamma paragraph?
I suppose so. I mean, we did already do a section on the release notes. That's already a paragraph, so could probably
Okay,
just copy from there. We can maybe expand it if they want more info, but I would use that as a starting point, and then I'm happy to add some more stuff if we need.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
All set.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking that on. So yeah, we've got a bunch of changes in this release. If you have missed any of them, I'd recommend taking a read through the changelog or that set of slides. But yeah, I think we're on track. Finally, it's been a long haul to get this one going, but I think we are really on pace to get a release candidate out this week. One thing, well, I've left it for triage, but one thing that we are still trying to fit into this release is Go version bumps, dependency bumps, all that stuff. But we can come back to that in triage. I think maybe that leaves Dave as the next one. Or Shane, if you wanted to add anything about 1.1, feel free.
Nope. Does anybody have any questions about 1.1? Then yeah, let's move on to Dave. Unless a hand goes flying up here in the next second.
This is super minor, but like there was a conformance test for observed generation bumping on gateway status, but it got moved behind a feature flag, so I kind of switched the test around so it doesn't need to be behind a feature flag, because in my mind that should be core. It already has an approved from Arco. So I kind of just added a new listener with a different host name instead of a different port. That way, this really should be like a core test.
Yeah, no, that's clever. I think that's a good idea. I missed that, but I don't see any issues.
Yeah, that's it. So if we can sneak that one in, that's all I got.
I just LGTM'd it, so.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, cool. Rob, more predictable release schedule for 1.2.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I've been very keenly aware of over the past month or more is that our release schedule has been less predictable than I think anyone would like. And so I've been trying to think of ways to improve that. And this is not in any way settled or anything like that, but I would like to think about some ways we can adjust how we're doing things for 1.2 and beyond. And one of the ideas, this is a very high level idea that I have not, put a lot of thought into yet, is that we could move closer to what Upstream does with very fixed windows for enhancements and then implementation and refinement, basically. But basically, within a month, the first month or two of a release, then everything that could possibly fit in that release. And after that point, the only question is if it will make it in time. But basically, pretty strict cutoff dates for each one of these timelines, so that you have a very predictable final release date instead of what we've been doing so far, which is kind of a bit more off the cuff. I don't if this is something that people are interested in, I'll spend some more time to write something up about this. But I just wanted to throw out the high level idea and gauge interest level, see if others had been thinking about ways to improve this, or if what we're doing right now is fine. Open to any feedback on this. Yeah, Dave.
Dave?
Do you have dates for your 1.2 and 1.3 release?
If we went with this process, I think that would be a very easy way to do that. We do not right now. We do not have any dates, but it would be great if we could. So if we could say, okay, this month we are, targeting nailing down all the enhancements that could be in scope. This next month we're working on iterating on them and getting them in, and then another month and we're refining, getting review, etc., and tidying up for release. So you could imagine that we end up with a 4-ish month release cycle that gets us pretty predictable results. But we don't have that right now, for sure. And that's one of the things that I'm very interested in getting towards. I think it would give a lot more simplicity to all the implementations that are working on top of Gateway API as far as when they might want to plan their releases. Yeah. So just my thoughts on this. I'm very interested in feedback and ideas for how we can make it better, but my default would be just to move a bit closer to what Upstream Kubernetes has already settled on. Cool.
If people have more thoughts on that asynchronously, maybe it would be good for us to just fire up a discussion on the repo and just say, hey, we're thinking about getting on a train schedule for releases.
Yeah, makes sense.
Incremental changes to make displaying reports easier for conformance. We were talking about this in Slack today a little bit. Where's the
Yeah, so this is,
recent conversation?
I've just been thinking about Christine's great PR to add display profiles to Gateway API documentation, which is really exciting. But I've been thinking, what is the most user-friendly way to consume this? Like if I'm someone who's relying on Gateway API, how do I understand this? It's hidden. There's a link halfway through the comments. Sanjay, I think, added it for deploy preview, but it's not linked in the. Yeah, that's the one you want. But it's really exciting, I think. But what I can't get past is just how we can make this make sense with our conformance profiles as they're structured today, right? So right now we have protocol specific profiles and then mesh kind of off on the side, which mesh assumes HTTP but doesn't have any coverage for gRPC, TLS, or any other kind of route. And I would love to be able to display, gRPC, it's going GA. I'd love to be able to display that somewhere in here along with mesh, because I think gRPC is like best for east-west and kind of okay for north-south. But yeah, anyways, so I don't have any solutions here. No, I have some ideas here, but I would just maybe draw a bit more. There's a Slack thread about this. We don't need to cover too much in this meeting, but I just wanted to see if anyone else had thoughts on this or ways we could make this better. Yeah, that's all.
So if nobody wants to talk about this on here, that is poll 2874. We would appreciate your feedback in there. There's an ongoing conversation about trying to make it look a little bit better for mesh. And there's also one in Slack recently, I think just today. There's a thread, which we can link to in the notes as well. Please do pipe in if you have some thoughts. Maybe particularly if you're all right. Was it Andy? Andy, want to talk about external DNS API?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the issue is backwards compatibility. So I think when I first implemented it, it was on like V1 Alpha 2. And I just kind of punted and said, it's still experimental. There's no backwards compatibility guarantees. And so it's gotten a lot more use. Once actually V1 was released, I actually went to go upgrade it to V1. I went to send a pull request, and then I realized, oh, someone else already did. So now it's using the V1 API, but there's this issue here that GKE by default is still using V1 beta 1, and so it can't find the external DNS can't find the resources, so it's not working. And I just wanted to kind of bring it up with y'all because I'm sure you've thought more about this type of thing before and how to handle this. I don't know, my kind of, once I looked at the CRDs and how they're released, I was kind of thinking maybe just revert everything back to V1 beta 1 because those seem to be served still and wouldn't be a problem necessarily. But I don't know if that's like a good solution going forward. I saw that like gRPC is about to move to V1, and it looked like there's a V1 Alpha 3 coming up, and I'm not sure if external DNS actually cares about that change or not, but I'm not exactly sure how to handle that. So I guess my first instinct actually was to implement some kind of shim that can watch all of the different versions and like convert them to whichever one I want to use internally in external DNS, but that seems like a pain in the butt. So if I can avoid that, I would like to, I guess, although it would be fun to do, but it seems like unnecessary probably.
Yeah, no, I feel your pain for sure. And this is Gaurav actually mentioned in chat what I was going to refer to. Gaurav for Gateway Cuddle has done something very similar where, well, actually, Gaurav, maybe I'll hand off to you. You can describe what you're doing.
I see a comment in chat about it.
Hey, yeah, sure. I actually just encountered this while back, and at least for Gateway Cattle, the current approach that we have taken right now is to use API discovery first of all to decide which is the preferred version as far as the Cube API server is concerned. What that will get you is it will tell you which all CRD versions or the API versions are available for you to use. And then maybe after that, you can kind of do an internal conversion to some stable state that your controller recognizes. For the time being, at least for Gateway Cattle, I believe it's safe to convert something like V1 Beta 1 to V1, at least for resources like Gateway and HTTP route. We don't have any backwards compatibility problems. What we essentially need is that from the version that the API server recognizes, you want to convert it to something that your controller can handle.
Yeah, sure.
And that right now is something which V1 still offers.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if others have thought about the problem. Sorry, I'll let others add.
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, it's pretty straightforward to convert between one to the other. As you know, last I looked at it, everything we cared about was pretty easy to change. One thing I was thinking about though with external DNS is it's not like a CLI thing. So if I kind of want to avoid using the discovery API because while it's running, things can get upgraded and move around. So I was
That's fair. Yeah.
thinking I should like watch the custom resource definitions to see if they change and then switch to other versions potentially, because you could upgrade the Gateway API custom resources and external DNS wouldn't notice otherwise if I just check on startup. But yeah, I'll take a look at the PR though. Thanks.
I mean, at least I'll just say something. I feel like a solution, one of the solutions could be something like where you say a particular version of external DNS only supports some particular versions of APIs. And then you can claim that if the customer wants the V1 APIs, they will have to update external DNS to a newer version. I'm guessing that's a possibility, but I think Rob and Costin have some things to add.
Yeah, I just said that Jen preempted me. Stay with beta, that's what I was going to say. It's probably a good idea to stick with beta until all the major vendors have moved to V1 and then move it. So there's no rush to move to V1. I think there are no differences between them as far as I know. And the other thing that I want to ask you, since you work on this feature, any plan to support the host names in the gateway resource?
It does support it.
I looked at the code a few weeks ago and it was missing, but okay, if it was added recently, then it's perfect. It's because it's route, but not the host in the gateway CR itself.
So the way it works is if the gateway listener specifies host names and an HTTP route does not specify host names, or it's like, you know, if it matches everything, it uses whichever one is more specific. So perfect. You can specify the gateway. Yeah.
I'll check it. I tried it and it didn't work, but maybe it was added after I tried it. Okay, thank you. That was my.
Unfortunately, like gateway or external DNS has to like implement a lot of logic to do that. There's nothing like a status on the gateway that says these are the host names I support. It has to compare everything and figure out what the actual gateway will support.
Yeah, I was looking at I filed a bug as well. I was looking at and probably that's relevant for other people using DNS, setting DNS entry based on the gateway. This allow routes, and I mean, is there one pattern of using gateway APIs to have the gateway owner specify the host names and not necessarily trust the HTTP route, which is usually a namespace owner. Yes. And basically just use gateway API and ignore whatever HTTP route is saying, because the gateway has a status with IP and it has the host names, and in this case, that's all that matters. I mean, what routes are doing is completely irrelevant. Anyway, that's
it doesn't ignore the routes. If the route says host foo and the gateway says host bar, external DNS says there's nothing here. Like these don't match.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But if route is saying, anyway, it's completely off topic. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think Well, first off, I should have started with this, but thank you for implementing Gateway API and external DNS. I know it's a huge win for the community ecosystem, whatever. So I'm glad it's there. Sure. The other thing I just would suggest that I think GK is the primary most prominent thing that's still running V1 Beta 1. That upgrade is gradually getting rolled out in GK 129 right now. You can use V1 and more versions over time. What I would say though is it is going to be safe to use V1 Beta 1 for a very long time. So we follow the same, roughly the same versioning policy as upstream. There are some differences, but one of the things that I would say is for something that is in standard channel, we're not going to remove it without having deprecated it for at least a year. I have no intention at all to remove beta ever, but if we did, we'd have to give at least a year advance notice to do so. So what you do right now, if you are reading from V1 Beta 1, is you get the widest possible range of CRDs. You get from V0.5 all the way to V1.1 soon and beyond. And realistically, if we're saying plus another year of deprecation, if we ever did deprecate, that's at least like 1.4, probably longer. You know, I have no plans to deprecate, but let's say somebody else wants to in the future, you're still a year plus advance notice. So I would recommend just reading and writing from beta indefinitely, just because even though GK is probably the most visible thing, there's still going to be other users that are still on slightly older versions of the CRD. But it is diminishing returns, right? It depends on how much work this is, because the longer this exists, the less painful it will become, right? Because more and more implementations have already moved to V1. V1 CRDs are more and more widespread. So if you already have moved there, then just evaluate how much it is worth it to move back, or just say, well, use this older version until you can install V1. Completely up to you on that.
The V1 versus V1 Beta 1 makes sense to me. Just use V1 Beta 1, that's fine. I'm a little concerned about the V1 Alpha 2 versus V1 Alpha 3.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of what's there right now is currently on V1 Alpha 2, and I'm not exactly sure how the conversion stuff works, but with the V1 Beta 1 and V1, it seems like it's a very clean conversion, just whatever. But V1 Alpha 2 and V1 Alpha 3 don't have a clean conversion. So I'm not sure how that's going to work without
No,
like
you're
a webhook.
You're completely right. So alpha is part of experimental channel, and it can have breaking changes. And that's what you saw with backend TLS policy. In 1.1, we're making breaking changes to backend TLS policy. And there is no easy way to support both. We've avoided that so far with every other API, and I hope we can make that a very rare occurrence. But once something does get to standard channel, you do have backwards compatibility guarantees. It's just while things are still in alpha, things can break in unexpected ways. And that's just unfortunate consequence of, experimental things, that you're not completely sure about them until they move on to standard.
Okay, so but if someone actually does switch to V1 Alpha 3, do they lose all their V1 Alpha 2 stuff? It's just not there anymore?
Sorry, to clarify, we only Kubernetes versioning is very complicated and messy and broken. But what we've done here is we've added V1 Alpha 3 just for backend TLS policy. That's it. That's the only thing that's affected.
Okay.
Everything else stays as V1 Alpha 2, whatever. The only breaking change exists in backend TLS policy, so we added a version bump just to indicate that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, then should be fine. I guess I'm done.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you for bringing it up. Let us know if hopefully that helped. Let us know more and catch up with us in Slack and stuff like that if you continue to need support in this matter. We're happy to kind of keep in touch. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Mark wants to discuss supporting TLS termination mode for TLS routes. If I'm not mistaken, Mark met up with us at KubeCon Chicago.
Yes, I did.
And brought this up. We asked him to post it. There was a good conversation going. I think, however, it stalled out a little bit. So yeah, so I was like, hey, maybe we could talk about it on today's sync. Thanks for joining, Mark.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, quick background of the feature request. On HTTP routes today, obviously there is TLS support with multiple modes. The two primary modes being termination or pass-through. And probably most users are using termination because it works as an ingress controller that way, and you can manage your TLS certificates in one central location. On the TLS route resource, it has the exact same support of built-in TLS certificates, but instead, well, I should rephrase that. It could, but it doesn't currently. Right now, the only option is pass-through, which means obviously the TLS traffic gets passed through to the backend, and the backend has to have the correct certificate. So my feature request is simply, can we add support for the enum of terminate on TLS routes and have them accept the same TLS configuration as on an HTTP route, so that you can have the gateway terminate the TLS for any TLS route traffic. And a little more background. I originally asked this of the Contour project because I mistakenly read the Gateway API docs and thought that it was that way, that my request actually was how the API doc was written. And the Contour devs corrected me, told me that was not the case, but they implemented it anyway in the hopes that this would get merged and conformance tests would be added. So this currently works in both Project Contour and Traffic's Gateway implementation.
So
Cool.
just,
Go ahead, Rob.
I'm just trying to understand the use case here. So basically you want incoming TLS request to be terminated, but then you want it re-encryption basically, or you want
No, so I want the naked TCP traffic to be passed to the backend.
So why wouldn't you just use TCP route then?
Because I need the traffic to be encrypted on the internet. So I need it to be TLS traffic from the client to the gateway. And then I don't want to have to configure my application to handle TLS certificates. So I'd like the server application to just get naked TCP traffic. I want the best of both worlds. I want the client to speak TLS, and I want the server to speak TCP. So I want the gateway to do that conversion for me.
Oh,
Go ahead,
I'll
let John go. Yeah.
The confusion here. So what you're describing is possible with TCP route, actually. The route protocol doesn't mean what the incoming traffic was. It means kind of what the outgoing, or, well, I don't know, we have a diagram somewhere, but it's not necessarily incoming. Like, for example, HTTP route can be used with HTTPS traffic. You terminate the TLS, and then we route based on the HTTP. What is somewhat missing in this story is if you want to do SNI based routing at the route level, then like TLS route today has SNI, but you can't use TLS route with TLS termination, right?
Correct. So that is my use case.
You can do it.
I want
to
be able to do SNI. Yeah, right, and that's right. But I have to make a gateway for every single domain name that I want to terminate for, and I don't want to have to do that.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a perfectly valid use case. Okay. I just want to make sure we read it out that use case. So, cool.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think that is in the issue somewhere. We talked about that it is technically possible to solve today with making one gateway and TCP route combination per host name that you want to route. Yep. But if you want to have exactly one gateway that can handle a bunch of different DNS names, either a list or with a DNS wildcard, then we need this support so that the one gateway can route to the correct backend based on the SNI.
Do you have just so I understand the number of, and that's very helpful, but do you have an idea of the scale you're talking about here? Like, is it a dozen different domains? Is it hundreds?
Yeah, like 10 to 20.
Okay. So
But
like
they're dynamic, as in my developers create them on demand. It's not like I have a static list of 12 that I can create a bunch of gateways for and be done with it. It's the same.
Each one would be a unique gateway listener. They could, like, with what's possible today in the spec, right? You would have.
Yes, I would need a unique listener for each.
So it's
for
almost,
what if I use TCP routes today? Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so there's a bunch of things kind of circling around here. John correctly pointed to gateway merging, which kind of would indirectly enable a use case awfully similar to this, of basically infinite listeners by just merging gateways together. I don't know that that's exactly what you want, but it's related. There's also, yeah, I'm just trying to think. So I think your use case makes sense. I do. I've just internally been having thoughts of, why do we need both TCP route and TLS route, or like, can we somehow simplify, merge those together, because they are pretty similar. But yeah, this is good feedback. I know we can't get to this in 1.1, but I think we do need. What's the current? I mean, I guess this has just kind of become stale.
Nobody
over
owns
time.
it currently. Yeah, I think
Okay.
somebody with a dog in this hunt needs to take it on to move it forward. And I think that's just where we're at when we're kind of bumping it, reminding people that this exists. It would seem that those with the most dogs in the hunt would maybe be Contour and maybe traffic, not to put them on the spot necessarily. Is anybody from Contour on that wants to speak to this? I know I'm kind of calling you out, but I'm curious.
So Sanjay's on vacation, so unless Steve's here, I don't know if there's any.
Yeah.
I don't see Steve. Okay. Well, then, I mean, they would seem to be like the most likely candidate to push forward. Thanks again for the kind of the bump.
Yeah, and I can bump this at a following meeting too, if the Contour people will be back then.
Yeah, I think
because again,
actually,
it's merged in and working in Contour today. So from a selfish point of view, like, I already have what I need. But yeah, from a conformance point of view, obviously I'd like to get official conformance tests for it.
I gotcha. Just to ask, are you in any position to basically add this on yourself and maybe use Contour as like the testing ground, or is that not really something that kind of falls into your
I definitely could. I haven't pushed anything through the Gateway API project before, so I'd probably need some help figuring out what the right steps are. But yes.
Okay. If you're interested in that, and again, you don't have to be, because I did kind of put you on the spot, but if you're interested in that, I think we would definitely be willing to like kind of support you through it, kind of get you started and stuff like that.
Okay.
I think the main thing that you'll want to familiarize yourself with, I'm guessing since you're going to probably do this within Contour, would be Contour's conformance tests, to kind of see, because that'll be the main thing that will, other than just changing specification and docs and stuff like that, need to be like a conformance test for it. Which would be very helpful in general, actually, the project, because I think TLS routes' main hangups has been the lack of conformance tests. So if you do want to step down this path and take this one on, you won't be left out to dry. Just say so, we can assign you, and then we can kind of keep telling you where to go next, and then hopefully work with like Steve a little bit to get some help for you there too on the Contour side. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
or at least
sure.
something to talk about next? Okay.
Yeah. And not to pivot, but is there
Go ahead.
also point in having the discussion around TLS routes versus TCP routes? Like, should those get squashed together in some way, shape, or form? Like, I feel like if we're adding
Conversation
all of
has come up
this,
before.
Yeah, if we're adding all of this TLS like specific support to the TLS route, it really is making the TLS route work the same way as an HTTP route. And obviously we don't have an HTTP and an HTTPS route. It does both. So it just kind of feels like it flows directly into that conversation.
Yeah, I think that
It's a
is
much bigger conversation.
Yeah, it is.
It's not the first time we've had that. Go ahead, Rob.
Is Shane cutting out for me? Any?
Is that Rob?
Okay, yeah.
It's just
okay.
me.
I don't know. You cut out for me
Is that
just for
better?
a second, but yeah, I think so.
Okay. Go ahead,
So
Rob, with
yeah,
what you're
I
saying.
think this is a big can of worms, and I think we should table it for a bit. But I really do want to have that discussion in a little bit more earnest, because we've basically had every route that is an HTTP or more recently gRPC route kind of stagnate in alpha because we haven't had a big push to move them forward. And we do need to have that discussion of what does it take? Are these really different flavors of the same thing? Are these, I'm not sure, but we're going to have a pretty big conversation around what it takes to move them forward this year.
Yeah, I think it's being generous to say it's a bag of worms. It's more like a bag of angry cats. But it is a conversation that needs to happen. The whole thing around like layer 4 and stuff like that in general, and then TLS, I think I guess to tell you where it's at, for those who maybe don't know exactly where it's at, it is what Rob said, but to expand on that a little bit, we're starting to see a little bit of motion on the UDP side. We have our first conformance test for UDP, but just over the years, the implementations just haven't really come forth to kind of support these and push them forward with conformance. So we have a whole bit at the top here actually, which we've kind of held off on talking about just because UDP is starting to show signs of life. But basically, we have been considering deferring them. That is, the APIs would stay there, but they would stay in alpha, and we basically say that they're not moving anywhere anytime soon because of this situation. So for those who are interested in L4 use cases, it would be really helpful for you to get together, maybe get together on Slack, figure out, identify who all is doing this, and maybe come up with like a contingency of people that can help push these things forward. It might even be good to have some specific brainstorming Zooms like outside of this normal meeting, just to figure out what we're going to do with that forward. I'd be happy to be involved in those conversations, as long as they take place 3 weeks or more out. And I think it's a really important topic of conversation, because we have to figure out not just TLS, but general layer 4, what it's going to look like in the future, because there are people doing it. Go ahead, Costin.
Yeah, I mean, first conversation probably should be if it's in scope for the gateway API in general, and how it relates with the service API changes or with Kubernetes in general, because network policy and a lot of L4 are kind of bread and butter for load balancer, service type load balancer, and a lot of other stuff. And it's always dangerous to mix layers. I mean, it's rarely done well. I mean, mixing source IPs in HTTP with HTTP layer, it's a recipe for disaster almost always.
Yeah,
I agree.
The just deciding if it's in scope is actually probably scare people, but I do think that is a conversation that we should have.
One of the goals for this project when it started was very much to tackle both the service and ingress API. But I think we've done ingress. Service we really struggled with. We'll see where we go with that. At least service type load balancer was very much intended to be in scope, but we'll see.
But now most gateway API implementations create a gateway and then create a service type load balancer.
Yeah.
We've not quite made it to what has been our what did we call it? Our North Star or something like that for a long time.
Could I just clarify real quick, Costin? It sounds
Sure.
like you're talking about squashing TLS and HTTP, and you're concerned about that, rightly so. But I don't think that's what people are talking about. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you're worried about HTTP, and like there is an HTTP route and not an HTTPS route additionally, I think it makes sense to have TCP and TLS be a single thing. It's very confusing as it is right now.
Not necessarily. So what I'm talking about is to have, HTTP and HTTPS are clear. There is no problem with either of them.
Well, there's only one.
Yeah, HTTP and HTTPS. I mean, you have HTTP. Both of them are HTTP route.
Yeah.
The fact that you add the certificate or not doesn't really change too much. And from a gateway implementation, pretty much all gateways are HTTPS and very few are HTTP. So I'm not worried about that. I'm saying that TCP route with source IP, destination IP, it's a completely different story, especially with pod IPs, service IPs, and all the other stuff. And TLS, it's yet another different story. I mean, TLS with SNI routing in particular, because TLS without SNI routing goes back to TCP since we don't know anything about it. And it's again, you are using a host name versus an IP. You have CIDR ranges versus it's a very, very different animal, and probably not very aligned with what we are doing. Delegation. How do you delegate routes? I mean, it's very weird.
Well, I did
I think it makes a lot of sense to me from like the separation of roles, right? The developers should be able to like use new host names and stuff, and they shouldn't have to have access to the TLS certificates.
That's fine, and this pattern can be used in a different working group specialized in network policies, and because we are talking CIDR ranges mostly, and how is a pod IP used very fast? What do you do about this? It's an entire different security threat model and completely different. Pretty much everything is different. If you think about it more in depth about I mean, it's not only routing to a backend; it's also all the related IP level properties.
Okay. I mean, maybe this isn't the time to talk about it. I don't understand what the IP addresses have to do with the gateway implementation. Like if you have a load balancer in the middle, the IPs aren't going to be the same anyway.
Oh yeah, no. It's a simple case is simple, but when you go to mesh use cases and to even for a regular load balancer, you don't need the entire infrastructure with allow route and other things. With if you just have a L4 load balancer with an IP and you forward to a service, you can do it much simpler.
Roger that. I think a continued conversation. So these APIs have been in alpha forever. We are not going to squash or like throw away any of them in any kind of hurry. I did add, so if that makes you feel better, we'll have a much longer kind of inclusive conversation about this. I did kind of change what I had for next, where we were talking about like deferring TCP and UDP route to kind of include, well, we just actually have to have this whole conversation sooner rather than later. It has always kind of been on the back burner because of the low priority. So again, just a general reminder to everybody who's interested in these use cases that a contingency of you all championing these use cases would be very helpful to make forward momentum. But in any case, we will have that conversation. I am certain of it at some point, and we will broadcast it so anybody who wants to be involved can join. We got 5 minutes left. Dave, I think you found a bug and maybe you're fixing it already. I'm not really sure what's going on in here.
So I couldn't find that 0 seconds string disables timeouts. So it's not on the website, but it's in the Go types. The reason why I kind of was figuring this out was because like technically I think the test is if timeouts are too low that they don't hit, like for example, like Envoy defaults and things like that. So like even though it looks like the test passes on some implementations, they actually don't implement it. So I'm kind of wondering, like, at least we have the 0 seconds there as like a nonce for how to disable it, but I'm wondering if we should tweak that test. I don't know, like if anyone wants to run the test.
I'm gonna throw an issue down for this.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, throw an issue down for this and take a look at that.
Yeah, all right.
I just noticed you were like live finding bugs, and then I thought maybe for a second there you were like fixing them while and then just like updating the doc while we were going. Thank you for figuring that out. Okay. We have 5 minutes left. Technically, oh, somebody wants to talk about gateway merging. I don't see a name on it, but I wonder if that's
I just saw it was on the next, and
John.
it
Go ahead, John.
seemed like it was on next. Now it's next. I have kind of been distracted by other things. What is, I mean, it's at risk. Is that just because we haven't pushed on it, or is there still active discussion?
No, it just ran out of time for this release cycle. That's basically all. I think there were enough unanswered questions on this one.
Okay. Is there anything we should do or just wait until post 1.1 and restart discussions?
I think post 1.1. I don't know. I mean, that's the big annoyance of this is it's really hard to make some kind of arbitrary cutoff, and so that's why I'm really pushing for in the next release cycle to have very clear cutoff dates for when when a gap is either in or out of scope for a release. So yeah, that is. I'm hoping to improve that, but this time it was a fairly arbitrary. We really need to release something like in April, and we're missing that, and so let's just go with what we have. Not great, but yeah, we had to make some kind of cut at some point.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, well, 3 weeks, because I'm actually working this week. So if anyone wants to have like committer access to that branch and wants to kind of like help out while I'm gone, let me know.
Sorry, could I interrupt? I was just about the external DNS thing. I was looking at the new updated like APIs, and gRPC skipped v1 beta 1.
Yeah.
So if you want me to use v1 beta 1, you need to put v1 stuff in it.
You're right. I should. So the thing about Gateway API is that every individual API has unique versioning, I guess you could say. So everything that went to V1 before went to V1 beta 1 first, and then V1. And then we realized that V1 beta 1 had basically become GA. And like the second it went to V1 beta 1, we weren't going to make any breaking changes. It was backwards compatible. It was not changing in any meaningful way. So we said, well, we should just remove that distinction entirely. What that means for gRPC route, at least, is more of a pain for sure. So we have yeah, there's a changelog entry. Maybe I should follow up offline. Yeah, let me follow up offline with you on that one, because yes, it is more of a pain with gRPC route. That's the short story. Yeah.
Cool.
But actually, there's a couple things in triage that are actually pretty important to get to, I think, if we've got.
We are out of time.
Okay.
We're right at the end of the hour here.
So the one thing I would really appreciate some reviews on the dependency upgrades. That's the very first one in the list. And the second one in the list is if anyone has struggled with testing logging for conformance, I'd recommend you look at the next one. I'm just going to LGTM it if I don't hear any objection, but I would prefer someone else take a look, because this is coming from someone else at Google, and usually I try and let someone else outside of Google approve, but just if anyone else wants to take a look, that's great. Otherwise, lazy consensus, I'll just merge it. Yeah, those are the main ones, but appreciate anyone to take a look at the rest as well. Cool.
So yeah, those are in the triage at the bottom of the doc, which is in the calendar invite. So please do check those out. Thank you everybody for coming. It's 7. We'll let you go, or 7 where I am. Sorry. We'll let you go. Have a good night. Cheers.
Thanks.